What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Jumping on here to preview the Steelers preseason finale against the Carolina Panthers. Man, time is just really flying by. It feels like yesterday we were just in week one, but I'm excited about the regular season. But we got one more game to preview and to talk about before we get there. But some big names sitting out this one once again: Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, of course, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward are not going to play either. But we will get some more of the Steelers starters in this one, which I'm really excited about, despite the Carolina Panthers pretty much resting all of their starters, including Bryce Young and even Andy Dalton. But we're going to get our first look at the Steelers' new look secondary for the first time in live action. I am really fired up about that. I know you guys are as well. We get our first look at Jalen Ramsey in a Steelers uniform. I've always said that I think Ramsey has an all-time like cornerback aesthetic, and I just think like, man, he's going to look so sick in the black and gold. So I'm excited to watch him play. But just before we get started, if you guys would, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop me a comment to let me know who you guys are going to be keeping an eye on tonight as well. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. So we're going to talk ball now, and then we're going to get to business later. We're going to talk some different stuff at the end of the video. If you guys want to stick around, I'm going to ramble a little bit about the future of this channel as it relates to the content that I'm going to be putting out and all that. But without further ado, like I said, we are going to get a look at some of the starters. We'll kind of start on the defensive side of the ball because I think that's the most really interesting component of this matchup. Going to get our first look at Jalen Ramsey. I think when it comes to Ramsey, the Steelers defense, as you guys can probably expect, as is preseason tradition, has been pretty static and unimaginative is the way that I would describe it throughout the preseason. It's been like a lot of cover three, man-to-man stuff. They're not really showing any wrinkles, and like, why would you, right? Like, you've got some of these new pieces. There's no need to give away any like, quote unquote secrets or anything like that. So even with Ramsey's kind of infusion to the fold tonight, I don't necessarily think we're going to see a bunch of like creative like sim pressures or creepers or seeing him blitz a lot or different things like that. But I do think we will be able to learn a little bit about their plan for just how they're going to deploy him. Like, what does his alignment look like? What happens in base personnel, right? Like, so if they're playing in their 3-4 base defense, like, is he at safety? Is he at outside cornerback? Like, who's off the field? Who's on? I know that Ramsey's going to be on the field no matter what. Like, they've pretty much made that clear. Like, he's not coming off regardless. So I'm just interested to see, like, what the first iteration of that kind of looks like. Is he going to play a little bit of safety and maybe Thornhill comes off the field with Deshaun Elliott in the back and then Slay and Porter at corner? Or is Slay going to come off the bench? I don't think Porter's going to come off the bench, and I definitely would not endorse that idea either. But I'm excited about that. And then just in general, like when they do go to their nickel stuff, how fluid everything looks just with the communication on the back end. I think the beat reporters asked Mike Tomlin about like kind of the reasoning for him wanting to play more of the starters in this one, in particular the secondary guys, and he kind of hinted on the fact that it's really more so about like the communication element. And Ramsey's talked about that too, like with him not, when you're playing on the boundary, a lot of his role throughout his career has been like, okay, like you're going to go cover the number one guy on the boundary, and that's going to be your responsibility. With that, you're not really involved in a lot of communication stuff. Like, yeah, you're still going to get the coverage check on the back end, but it's really just like mano a mano. When you're playing, some safety, some slot corner, you're more involved with like the checks and how you're adjusting to certain motions and bunches and stacks and the hand signals and stuff like that. So I just think, stuff that we've talked about for the first two games, like, you don't want to see a bunch of coverage busts, like how are they talking to each other, communicating on the field, is definitely more pertinent tonight, because these are the guys that are going to actually be out there when the games start to matter. And then, with Carolina not really playing a lot of their starters necessarily, I think it's going to be difficult to say like, oh yeah, they look great against these like second, third stringers against the Panthers. Although they are playing Jalen Coker, who I think is like a really underrated player in the league right now. But just like, I think physically, how do they look? When I went to Latrobe, I was really impressed by how Ramsey and even Slay was really moving. But this is definitely a different style defense than the one that both of these guys played in over the past several years, particularly Slay, just with like more press coverage, playing more at the line of scrimmage than he's been kind of accustomed to. But Slay's a technician. I don't anticipate that that's going to be a challenge for him. It's more just about like, can he, continue to fend off Father Time? Because like once that athletic cliff comes, like it comes really fast. And I don't want another like Cam Sutton situation where it's like you get on the field and like you pop on the tape and you can just already tell like the athleticism gone. But based on what I saw at camp, I don't think I'm not nearly as worried about it as I think like other people are. But I'm just excited to see, those guys all play together. And then really, Derek Harmon continuing to build on that, like really, I feel like, flashy game against the Bucks. Like, he had a couple really impressive reps. I thought his run defense was absolutely fantastic. Just doing a good job, like weaponizing his length, resetting the line of scrimmage, being gap sound, but also like falling back and making stops and making plays around the line of scrimmage. I thought he played extremely well. We got to see a little bit again between that relationship with him and Keanu Benton. I think the most optimistic part of me wants to say that duo is going to be the future of the Steelers front, right? Like, you got some aging guys up there. You've got, obviously Cam Hayward, is not going to play in this one. Still got some contract stuff to be sorted out on his behalf. But, I think, there's a lot of room for optimism in terms of those guys really being the guys that are going to lead this defense for years to come. And then I've been pretty impressed with the linebackers overall too. It's unfortunate. Or I guess it's unfortunate that we haven't seen like the edge rushers play, because I think that's like obviously a big staple of their defense. There's just nothing to really be learned from guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, who's still dealing with the groin, and then Nick Herbig, who played a couple snaps last week, got a quick pressure, and then came out with a little soft tissue injury. I think he's going to be okay, though. But it does sound like we're going to get some reps between the inside linebackers. So how does the distribution of labor like pan out with that? Is it just as simple as like, Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson are the first team linebackers, and they don't come off the field until they're done for the night? I anticipate that that's really going to be how it's going to be in the regular season. I think Queen's going to be the every down, every 100% type of snap guy, and then Peyton Wilson's also going to play a ton. And then maybe like specific matchups or personnel groupings or things like that, I think you could see a guy like Malik Harrison come in if teams are trying to get heavy with a bunch of pullers, guys like that, because that's really like more of what his game is tailored to on the defensive side of the ball. I have like really enjoyed watching Cole Holcomb like bounce back from like a really significant injury. I just think it's nothing short of a miracle that he's even been out there to be out there on the field. He's made a lot of plays against the run. I do think that the coverage stuff has been pretty shaky. You can tell that he's still getting kind of the rust knocked off a little bit, but that's just something to watch for tonight as it relates to that. I definitely think that, he definitely deserving of a roster spot, and I definitely don't anticipate that changing one way or another. It's just a matter of like, can he continue to ramp up physically? And then I think it's going to make for some interesting decisions in terms of what they're going to do with their game day inactives, like who dresses, who doesn't. That's some of those like third, fourth, fifth outside linebacker spots, just like it is with depth at every position. It's going to come down to special teams more than anything else. So those are some things I've watched for. I would also say like the addition of Chuck Clark. I'm not really sure if I've talked about it as much like on this channel, but I've been really impressed with like how he's played against the run, like really just fast fitting, triggering downhill. I definitely think in the event that like Deshaun Elliott does have to miss some time at any point this year, they've kind of insulated themselves in terms of having a competent box safety that can really bang down there. But I would say the same thing in terms of like the Holcomb stuff. Just the coverage element of it has been a little bit shaky. But just before we go to the offensive side of the ball, I would also say that, the cornerbacks, what happens with the end of the roster is definitely going to be interesting. I think that the top four guys, the three headliners, and then Brandon Echols as the top backup, those are all really set in stone. I definitely think that Beanie Bishop and James Pierre are on the inside looking out and firm, like on the 53, but maybe not on as firm footing as maybe we anticipated, or at least a guy like Bishop. But he needs to continue to like put forward a really strong effort in this one. I think he talked a little bit about, just playing more aggressive downhill, especially like in the screen game, being more involved as a tackler. And, I'm very curious on what his role is going to be on defense. It seems like it's going to be something to where he's going to struggle to kind of get snaps unless there's an injury happening. So that means he's going to really have to show out on special teams and things like that. But with Corey Trice missing the last several weeks, that's opened up the door for James Pierre. Pierre is a really good gunner. He's fine as like your sixth cornerback or anything like that. Would you upgrade over if you had the opportunity to? Sure. But like, he's an NFL caliber player. That's really all that needs to be said about him, but he's going to make the team based on special teams in general. Trice would be a guy, and maybe Dante Kent, just depending on like what their viewpoint of him is like in the classroom, like how well does he know the playbook and just their overall impressions of him through minicamp and things like that. But with him being in a boot and pretty much missing all of training camp, it's really unfortunate. We kind of said this a little bit like with Roman Wilson last year. When young players miss training camp, it's just really difficult to get them like on a moving train. And I think Mike Tomlin's been very transparent about that over the years. you just get put so far behind just because you don't have that acclimation period to get used to the speed of the game, and you don't have time to get acclimated with your coaching staff, with your teammates, to get you involved in the game plan. So Ken is another guy. Maybe he goes to IR as well. We'll see what happens with that. But you can designate a couple people, send them to IR, and then still bring them back without them counting against the 53. From my understanding, and roster cutdowns are set to take place on Tuesday, I think at 4 o'clock. So there's a lot of movement going on around the NFL right now. And I think some of that, we've seen a couple wide receiver trades. I anticipate the Steelers are going to at least check in on a lot of these deals. I would also like point out the offensive line stuff. There's been some rumors out there that maybe Dalton Risner, a longtime guard, could be wanting to take a visit to Pittsburgh. He seems like he's probably got some offers, I would imagine, to start. I don't think Risner would necessarily step in as a starter here, but I do think the depth of the offensive line has been a little bit of a concern for me throughout the preseason. I think the backups have like really, really struggled. And look, I understand like offensive line depth, it's basically an oxymoron in the NFL, right? Like we don't have enough like athletic and competent 300-pound individuals to stop all of these like incredibly athletic pass rushers, right? Like I'm not stupid enough to think that there are, but at the same time, I would like for the Steelers to have a little bit more security in the event of an injury, especially along the interior, mainly just because like Isaac Seumalo, he's a guy who throughout his career has dealt with some injuries. He's also getting up there a little bit in age over the 30 mark. So it's just something I would point out. But as it relates to the receiver position, we'll kind of start there. You know, the injury to Ben Skoranek has opened up the door for a guy like Brandon Johnson. Johnson's been running really with the first team, like as the X receiver. I've seen some good things. He drew a key pass interference penalty last week. He also had that nice scramble drill hookup with Mason Rudolph in the end zone for the touchdown. I really liked on that play how he came back to the football and worked back to the ball to kind of prevent the cornerback from getting in there to force the incompletion. But I would say that Johnson needs to get off press a little bit better, like have a more refined release plan and just not get hung up as much at the line of scrimmage. But he has been a contributor on special teams. That's kind of something that he has going for him. Right now, I just put out my 53-man roster projection for SteelersNow.com. I published that, I think, a couple of days ago. Johnson wasn't on it because I had the Steelers only keeping 5 wide receivers, you know, the top 3 guys in terms of, you know, DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Ben Skoranek, and then the 5th guy that I had on there was Scotty Miller, just because I think he's had such a strong summer. He's also a guy that can help you in special teams. He's got NFL experience. He's played in an Arthur Smith system for multiple years at multiple different stops now. So I would give him the leg up. Now, could Johnson maybe knock Miller off with a strong performance? I don't know. That kind of feels like a little bit of a long shot, but could he maybe convince them that they should keep 6 wide receivers? Sure. And I also don't think that either one of those guys, whether it be Miller or Johnson, would prevent them from going after or signing a guy like Gabe Davis, who took a visit to the Steelers facility again this week. I'm not really sure what the holdup is there. I would imagine that there are a lot of just medical rechecks going on with him because he had I think it was a knee injury last year. Really disappointing season with the Jags, and you know they cut him loose. And I just think that trying to figure out where he's at physically, from what I understand of the situation, is that Davis is looking for a home that is going to allow him to kind of ramp up through the early portions of the season. Like he's not necessarily going to be ready to be like 100% snap guy from the jump. At least that's how I understand it. But we'll see what happens with that. And just with the other pass catchers, it sounds like that Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, like they're going to dress. So I just think more than anything, the deployment of those guys, what do the combinations look like? How well are they able to kind of mix up those combinations, the things that they're doing, the run concepts that they're getting to, the matchups that they're able to create with those guys? How much do Freiermuth and Smith actually play with one another? I think that, you know, Darnell Washington's had such a strong summer that it's going to be difficult to kind of take him off the field. I think that he's almost invaluable to this offense, in my opinion, definitely more so than I think other people probably realize. So just seeing how the distribution of labor kind of works out in that regard. And then, you know, kind of lastly with the offensive line, I've been really, really impressed with the tackles, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu. Fautanu has been an absolute blast to watch on film. Like he's only played about 20-something snaps or something like that. And it's just taking everything in my power to remain composed and not get kind of over my toes a little bit about how excited I am. I think he looks fantastic physically. his ability to like change up his sets, just the footwork looks fantastic. Athletically, he looks 100% back to form. And I think Broderick Jones just looks a little bit more comfortable on the left side. Definitely some stuff in terms of like technique that still need to be panned out, but definitely a much better performance than he put together last preseason. Really, Zach Frazier had some struggles last game. Vita Vea is a absolute monster human being. There aren't really many matchups like him around the NFL, but I think a bounce back in that regard should be expected. Zach was a guy that I thought was like an all-pro caliber player last year, so not worried in the slightest. I am a little bit concerned about the snaps. I counted 2 or 3 low snaps again last week. One on the interception early to Roman Wilson, another on the drop in the end zone by Max Hurleman. So just getting those snaps figured out, it's been an issue, like widely reported by the beat reporters that have been at training camp every day. So that stuff's going to definitely need to be ironed out. I know Aaron Rodgers not playing in this one, but it's just kind of strange. Like, I really don't understand. Like, some of the best centers in the sport, like him, Creed Humphrey, guys like that, have issues like snapping the football. It was a problem early last year, and then it seemed to get like better as the season went on, but it's just something to keep an eye on. And then, they've been really pass heavy when the first offensive line squad has been in the game, like a crazy pass run split. I'm not really sure of the rationale behind that. I did a film room on some of those really nice pass plays yesterday that I posted for channel members, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I was really impressed with some of the designs that Arthur Smith had put in. Now, having said that, they have not ran the football very well in the preseason early in games. So that is something that I'm looking for, like Jalen Warren, who's going to dress tonight. I anticipate they'll probably give him a couple carries. I just want to see them execute the core concepts. Like, can we get a couple nice wide zone runs out of 12 personnel, something that we're going to actually be able to lean on a little bit. And once the regular season gets around, I mean, with Rodgers and DK, Arthur Smith had that funny quote where he was like, we didn't bring those guys in to run the wishbone. This is still going to be a run-heavy, run-centric offense. It's going to base out of heavy personnel. Got to be able to run the rock. And I think some of the challenges that come associated with that style of play is if you're wanting to play with a bunch of like 12, 13 personnel, condensed splits, it's going to crowd the box. Guys are going to have to be assignment sound. That's something that I've noticed over the last couple games is just still seeing a lot of the same stuff we saw last year where they were like bottom 5, I think, in rushing success rate. Is there's just a lot of mental errors. You got guys at the second level, like not getting to the second level consistently enough, and then guys flying through the B gap just way too frequently. So Jalen Warren, would love to see him show a little bit of pop. I still don't necessarily love his fit in a wide zone centric system. I just think he's a better like downhill runner. But this is year 2 in the system. We'll see if him being healthy and coming out of the preseason is already going to be him getting off to a better start than he did last year. So I still expect Caleb Johnson to get a ton of work. I definitely don't think that a guy like Lou Nichols is someone that can really make a push for the 53-man roster, but I am very interested in like his ability in terms of like maybe being able to make the practice squad. He's probably the one that's like interested me the most out of the backfield. I thought he had a really strong drive once he got into the game last weekend. Then I would also say, like, in terms of how the distribution of roster spots goes, like once they put out the original 53 or the final 53, which is always fluid at the bottom, I think a guy like Andres Pete is going to be someone to keep an eye on. Pete's a guy into his 30s, right? Typical story, like misses most of camp, but he came in really good shape. He played left tackle in week 1. I thought that was pretty shaky. And then he played left guard last week. I thought that was actually better. Having that flexibility positionally is definitely something that if you're going to be a backup in the NFL, like you need to be able to play both spots. Not, it's really helpful if you can play both sides, like left and right. But if you can offer some sort of versatility in terms of can you snap, can you play guard and tackle, that's just huge because it helps, again, insulate yourself against like the rigors of the NFL season. And, I thought that Pete did some really good things last week. See if he can build off that performance. He was one of the last guys that I put on my 53-man roster projection. I don't necessarily feel great about it, but he's a guy with a ton of experience. And like you just look at some of the injuries that they've suffered, like Ryan McCollum, their backup center. He hasn't like played very much this summer. Like he's missed both preseason games. Like I thought he was fine when he had to fill in for Frazier last year in that Giants game. But it would be nice to get him out there. I'm not really sure if he's going to play tonight, if at all, but there's been a lot of struggles, particularly along the interior once the backups have come in. So definitely something to keep an eye on in that regard. And then just finally, kind of to wrap this thing up, just the punter situation. I think that both the punters have been absolutely fantastic. And like the dream scenario for the Steelers has always been both these guys look like really competent punters, and there's someone out there that is in need of an upgrade and would be willing to flip them some type of late day 3 pick swap. Like you can have my sixth, next year, the year after, we'll take your seventh, something like that. If you can get that out of a punter swap, that would be excellent. But I think that like Waitman and Johnson, man, they're really like neck and neck. I honestly couldn't call it in terms of like who I think has the edge. Like Mike Tomlin said, they're going to go like boom for boom. They're going to trade off series. Obviously, you don't want to see the punter out there all that much, but you need to get some clarity on who they're going to keep. So I kind of lean towards Johnson a little bit, but I think Waitman's maybe been a little bit better in the preseason. Like I said, I think it's really close to call. So it's something, not the most exciting positional battle, but I think for the most part, the 53-man roster is mostly set. I mean, you're really looking at those last like couple spots that are still to be determined. But more than anything else, that's kind of what I'll be looking for. All right, now to talk about some other stuff. So just close this thing out. And I'm going to try to like be really brief on this. I don't want to like rant and ramble for too long, but just wanted to kind of put a PSA out there about the channel before we head into the regular season. Some of you guys probably heard, been extremely challenging for small content creators like myself to kind of produce the type of football content that I originally created this channel for, which is the film room stuff. Okay. So using all 22 in my videos kind of subjects me to a bunch of like BS. Sometimes the videos are kind of get like demonetized, meaning that I can't profit off the ad revenue that the views generate. Other times the video can get removed entirely, or I won't be able to post it on the platform at all for copyright reasons. Luckily, I haven't had any like run-ins like with true strikes that could jeopardize like my channel entirely and everything that we've kind of built over here. I don't want to bore you guys with the details on the copyright stuff. Honestly, it just doesn't matter like whether I like it or not, how I feel about it. This is just the reality in which we live in, right? In terms of solutions, like you're seeing other, like a lot of it's disappearing off YouTube, to be quite honest with you. Other creators are kind of going to like Patreon, Substack. In my case, YouTube memberships still be able to create the stuff that they want in terms of like the really in-depth sicko stuff like we talk about. But I enjoy talking ball on here with the previews, the recaps, etc. But the X's and O's stuff is like definitely what I'm most passionate about. I think you guys, if you've been around for a long time, since we kind of started this thing a couple years ago, you all know that. But just with the current landscape being what it is, the truth is that more of the film room stuff is going to have to be put behind the paywall to kind of offset what I'm going to be losing off the ad revenue. Just before I go any further, okay, I want to reiterate that this is 1000% optional, okay? There will still be plenty of content on this channel for you, okay? Everyone has their own financial situation. I totally get it. I appreciate all of you all regardless. Every subscriber, view, like, comment, share on social media, all that stuff. Like I could not have built this platform without your all support, and I cannot express that enough. Okay. But if you aren't familiar, the all pro tier for the YouTube membership is by far the most popular one. I've had a bunch of signups here recently over the last like week or so as we head back into the regular season. It gives you a lot of different stuff. It gives you like the Super Bowl trophy badges, access to chat emotes, additional content such as the film rooms, early access to some of the videos. Like if I'm cranking out a video early and I don't want it to like mess up the algorithm, I'll release that early to the channel members to give them like a sneak peek if they're up at that point in time. But it's $4 a month. There's no long-term commitment. It's less than a cup of coffee. If you guys want to try it out, you like it, cool. I'll be really excited about that. I'll try to make it worth your while. If you don't like it, you can always just unsubscribe. That's okay. I'm not trying to make a killing here. I promise. I just have to make something for the time that I'm putting in, that I'm dedicating to this and away from my family. I'm sure that you guys understand that. So I really appreciate that. But if you're interested in signing up, the link is in the description of all of my videos, including this one. In case you missed it, I did a film room that I posted last night, just on several of Arthur Smith's play calls from the Bucs game, going over like the passing game. Definitely some cool stuff. They left some touchdowns on the board. Wanted to break those plays down really in depth. Again, plenty of content over there. I also have a Yins No Ball podcast. It's an hour and a half of me and John Ledyard, who I know a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, just giving our takes to the Steelers preseason, good, bad, and different, like what we're keying in on, what we're excited about going into the regular season. It's an hour and a half full of content. That is there as well, just because John, like his Substack is for his paid members, and I don't want to undercut his business over there by putting it on the public side of mine. But again, I'm really ready for the season. I'm going to do my absolute best to make this year the best possible, to give you guys the best content that I can possibly provide. I will check in with you guys after the game tonight or early tomorrow to give you guys a recap of this one. I'm really excited to get some food, kick back, watch the game. I hope that you all enjoy it as well, and I will check you guys very soon.